Happy Tuesday and happy April. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another live episode of Season's Sunflower Hour. How have you all been doing? I miss this family. I miss you guys when I don't see you for a few weeks. So throw up some good stuff in the comment section. Let me know what you've been up to, how you're doing. And as always, let me know where you're tuning in from. I love seeing that, especially when we have viewers from around the world. I want to see you guys blowing up that comment section. Now, it has been a crazy month since I have seen you guys last. There have been so many amazing things going on. And as always, I'm going to keep you guys up to date on all of it. It is almost walk season. We are kicking off so soon. It's around the corner. Walk ALS at Cantigny Park in Wheaton is kicking off on May 30th. And don't you worry. I promise you there is still time to get in. So if you have any interest in starting your own walk team, joining somebody else's walk team, or even just coming out to spend the day and have some fun. It is a great atmosphere. It is a great vibe. There are so many activities and great things to do. So come join us. The link is in the comment section for all the good stuff. And if you have any questions, please feel free to always reach out. We love having you as part of this family. If you guys have been on past episodes, you have heard us talk about the walk and what an experience it is. And I would love to have all of you there. I might even see you there. So come stop by, say hello. Ooh, we've got someone joining from northern Wisconsin. That is so exciting. Thanks for popping in. If you are new to this, if you are new to our show, I hope you come back and check us out again and join the Sunflower Hour family. And while you're at it, you guys make sure wherever you are watching from, YouTube, Twitch, anywhere, make sure that you hit that follow, hit that subscribe, hit the like, just hit all the buttons so that you guys never miss a beat and always stay on with what is going on. This was super exciting. We got a little hello there. That's what happens during a live show. That was Corinne. She got to say hello to you. You got a sneak peek. You got to see her for a quick little second. She is amazing. She is our producer extraordinaire behind the scenes, holding it down, making sure that everything goes smoothly. So I love that. That was kind of a little Easter egg in there. Just popping in to say hi to everybody. Corinne, we love you. I know you can still see us, even though we can't see you. That was a beautiful Corinne, everybody. So not only do we have the walk coming up on the 30th, but we also have, this is huge. This is my favorite time of the year, if I'm being honest. May, as most of you may know, is ALS Awareness Month. Now, I say it's my favorite because obviously I wish we didn't have to have this month, but we do. And I love being able to spread the word, to share what we are doing here at ALS United Illinois, to share what ALS is, spread some awareness, raise some much needed funds, and just get out there in memory of and fighting for all of those that are battling ALS. So I hope that all of you join us next month to celebrate a little bit extra and celebrate May as ALS Awareness Month. We'll have a great show coming for you guys next month. And I'm going to tease you a little bit. You're going to have to tune in. But if you are an animal fan, if you love animals, you are not going to want to miss next month's show. That's it. I'm going to leave you with that and let your mind wander and ponder on that. So we will see you next month for that. But now look, we have so many other great things going on, but I want to get straight to our first guest, because if I'm being honest, my biggest dilemma prepping for the show was how in the heck are we going to fit all this great stuff into 1 hour? He is so incredible, and I still don't know how we're going to do it. So we might have to have him back on for a part 2, because this man has lived some lives. He has done some incredible things, and I can't wait for all of you to meet him. He is our official Team ALS coach. He's incredible. His experience is nothing short of extraordinary. He began running marathons back in the 80s and fell in love with the sport and has since turned his passion into a lifelong mission. Now, since 1995, he's coached more than 10,000 individuals, helping people from all backgrounds achieve something that they may have once thought was completely impossible. As for personal accomplishments, it's absolutely remarkable, and that is a true understatement right there. He's run over 100 marathons. Yes, you heard me say that right. He's run over 100 marathons. He's completed races in all 50 states, including DC. He's conquered all 7 continents, and he's finished marathons in the 6 World Marathon Majors. Insane. He's absolutely incredible. Now, what makes Coach Brendan so special to our community isn't just his resume, which is pretty spectacular, but it's the heart that he brings to Team ALS. He helps our runners prepare not only physically, but mentally and emotionally, guiding them through training, nutrition, injury prevention, and the mindset it takes to cross the finish line. And he does all of this while all of this is happening while running for a cause bigger than themselves. Now, today we're going to dive into his journey, his philosophy, and what it means to support a community like ours through something as powerful as running. So please welcome to the show an absolutely fantastic, incredible man, our official Team ALS coach, Coach Brendan.
Hello, Susan. How are you?
Hello. This is literally, you need that shirt that says the man, the myth, the legend. You are that.
Well, thank you very much. And I chose one that is sunflower yellow because of the sunflowers of ALS United and part of the mission. It's very important to me. And I've been very fortunate to have worked with Team ALS for, probably over 15 years now, almost since the very beginning of having a team, a charity team, as part of the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. And it has been a wonderful experience. And over many of those years, I've also been present at and participated in the walk at Cantigny. So and that usually corresponds with the Saturday that training begins for those who are embarking on the marathon journey. So it's nice to see some of the families who gather out at Cantigny, and in many cases, uh, people who have been at the first group. But we used to do group training, and some would go from the group training on Saturday morning along Chicago's lakefront, hop in their car, go out to week and be at Cantigny later on in the day. And surprisingly, we meet each other again later on in the day and have two workouts that day. One, the first day of marathon training, and then participate in the walk with family members and friends.
That is awesome. And that speaks volumes as to anyone watching. If there's any question about the kind of fun you'll have at a walk, it's clearly enough to come straight out of a run in Chicago and drive all the way out to Wheaton to come to this walk. It is that powerful. It is that important. So you've got to experience it yourself. Are you coming this year? Are we going to see you at the May?
I'm not sure if I'm going to be in town that day, but I've got it marked on my calendar now that I know about the date and the excitement of that.
I love it. I hope we get to see you there. But I want to take it back. I want to take it way back, back to 1985, actually, because you told me this. I thought it was so cool. In 1985, you signed up for your first marathon on race weekend.
Yes.
Completely crazy, completely unheard of. So take me back to that. What in the world made you do this? And what the heck made you think you could just rock up, show up to the marathon and decide, hey, I'm here. Let's do this. Let's just go run a marathon.
um, I remind myself that there was a youthful indiscretion.
Okay.
And and for many of you who are familiar with the Bank of America Chicago Marathon nowadays, you might be hard pressed to believe that yes, I did sign up on race weekend for that race. I signed up on Friday, the race was on Sunday. I had done very little training, but I was an egotistical young lawyer practicing in the city of Chicago and just wanted to take a break from the stresses of my life and figured, why not go run a marathon? I had run a little bit. I wasn't much of a runner at that time. I had taken some time off from running, but I had some friends who were running the race as well. And in fact, I met a client of mine at the starting line of the race, and he helped get me through a good part of the race before he pulled away. But the world was very different back then. The world was very different in competing in marathons. The number of the races, the number of runners in that race, we had approximately 3,500 runners. And the course was different. We finished coming up Lakeshore Drive and turning off of Lakeshore Drive and finishing at the horse trough near St. Joseph's Hospital on Cannon Drive inside Lincoln Park. And the most memorable part of that is not only that I signed up on race weekend, but I had a very humbling experience that day. First, as we were coming up Lakeshore Drive at about mile 22, 23 of the race, I was spent. I obviously didn't know much about training or running long distances like that, but I was still standing and progressing pretty slowly. And along comes this woman, and I, you know, thought she looked a little bit different. It turns out that she was 80 years old and ran right by me, and I couldn't catch her. And shortly after that, another woman passed me, and it turns out that she was in the race and was 7.5 months pregnant. Now, I know about both of these women because they had their names and photos in the paper the next day. And I remember each of them sending encouraging words to me as they ran by me, and I could not catch either one of them and didn't see them at the end of the race because they finished far ahead of me. And that was the beginning of my running career. Um, Inauspicious, but it was a way to let me know that things could change and could improve. Now, I should also add that with both of these women at the time, this was 1985, and a couple of other things happened. That was a time when women were not really welcome in the marathon world. And many people thought that women could not run long distances. The year before was the first year that women ran in the Olympics in the marathon distance, and that race was in Los Angeles, won by Joan Benoit Samuelson. Joan was in that race that day in Chicago, and she set the American world record or the American record for the marathon distance that stood for almost 40 years before it was finally broken. And the other person who won the men's race that year was a guy by the name of Steve Jones. A year before that race, in 1984, on the course in Chicago, he set the world record. In 1985, he was coming up Lakeshore Drive, made the turn, didn't realize how close, and he lost the record in the London Marathon in '85, a matter of 4 or 5 months before Chicago, and missed the new world record by less than 3 seconds in Chicago
Oh,
because he didn't know where he was on the course relative to the clock. Nowadays, as you're running on the course, the lead runners follow a vehicle which tells them what their time is and how close they are to the world record. But at that time, he was running completely alone. It wasn't until he got to the last 200 meters of the race that he realized how close he was. He put on a mad dash, but fell just a couple of seconds short of
oh,
setting the world record again.
shoot. I, I had no idea about any of these things. So you got to run with an Olympic runner, technically. You guys both did that American, both did that Chicago Marathon.
Well, I take credit for this. Now, I've also had the privilege. I've had the privilege of being on the course for, I think it's now 8 world records being set between men and women, with Chicago, Berlin, and other races that I've ran over the years. It's been simultaneous where somebody has set a world record, and I take credit for each one of them because
100%. As you
because
should.
I was chasing them, and
As
they
you
knew
should.
that I was chasing them, and they kept running a little bit faster so
Yeah.
that I wouldn't catch them. Even if I was a mere 2 or 3 hours behind them, they knew I was
Nope.
back there.
They felt the fear. They felt the
Yes.
fear, coach. They knew you were there. I 100%. I am on board with that. It is all because of you. I think you are good luck. If you weren't there, those records wouldn't have happened. Can't
Well,
change my
that's
mind.
also true what I tell all the runners on Team ALS United, that if a course record or world record is set in Chicago, they are part of that record and they can take credit for it. So it's not just me, it's
Yeah.
all of you who are members of Team ALS United running as part of that race that takes credit for that race and chasing them across the finish line. So mark that down. You can take credit for those world records.
I hope everybody's listening to that right now. They all get to take credit for that and put that on their beautiful memory board. What changed for you? Because this was your first one. As you said, you were young and you didn't know much because you just showed up that weekend without much training, but you stuck with it. You kept going. So was there a defining moment when that shift happened, when running shifted from becoming a hobby to more of a lifelong passion, as it seems like it is for you?
Yes, I think that the moment that really turned the corner for me
Mhm.
came 10 years after that race in 1995. In the intervening years, I had moved out to Arizona, was practicing law out in Arizona, got divorced, moved back to Chicago, and just started running again for exercise. And in 1995, there were a couple of things that worked. The first is that in October of 1984, or 1994, the year before I returned to running, a woman by the name of Oprah Winfrey ran the
Mhm.
Marine Corps Marathon. And many people thought, well, if Oprah can do it, I can do it. So
Mhm.
this kind of triggered a new running boom, um, more so number wise for women more than men. A lot of women wanted to beat Oprah's time. She finished in 4.5 hours in Marine Corps. So there was a
Whoa.
big boost in the numbers of people wanting to run a marathon. The second thing was a confluence in this factor was that the following year in April of 1996, was the 100th running of the Boston Marathon. Now, Boston, of course, was yesterday, held yesterday in the streets of Boston. But in 1996, there was the 100th anniversary. So there was a big demand of people trying to qualify by running a marathon fast enough to qualify. And I should add that at that time, there were no charity runners in the Boston Marathon. The only way that you could get in was to run a qualifying time that was determined by your age and your sex. Men and women had different qualifying times, but they're in 5 year increments. And in order to qualify to get in and be able to register, you had to run a race at a qualifying time, which is known as a Boston qualifier or a BQ. Um, so my goals at first, when I started training again after an 8 year hiatus of running seriously, was first to try to beat Oprah, and then also to try to qualify for and run the Boston Marathon. And I was fortunate enough to be able to qualify for Boston that year. I improved my time between the 85 marathon and the 95 marathon in Chicago by over an hour and a half. And in that training season, I really learned to love running, love endurance running. It became meditative for me. It was a way for me to both calm myself, relax, come in tune with myself, really understand better what I was feeling inside, more internal motivation, trying to get the best out of myself rather than comparing myself to other people externally. But on a lot of those training runs, it was really mindful. It was really calming, and I just found a lot about myself. I should also add that in between those periods, between 85 and 95, I also got sober. As a young lawyer, I one of my coping techniques was drinking, and it became an unhealthy coping technique. And so in 1989, I got sober, and as part of that, I turned to exercise. And of course, being a moderate person as I am, my middle initial is M, which I tell people stands for moderation. So instead of running for about 30 minutes at a time, I ran marathons.
I love it. You just make me smile so many times. I think that what a healthy way to change out, get rid of drinking and start running marathons. Why the heck not? Did you
Yep.
beat Oprah's time, by the way?
Well, I did. My time that year, her time in 1994 was 4 hours, 30 minutes. My time in Chicago was 3 hours, 18 minutes. So I beat her by a smidge. And I also was able to qualify in my age group for the 100th Boston. And I ran Boston that year in April of 96.
Wow. What led, because clearly you have a love for this, but to go from, loving marathons to all of your accomplishments, running in all 50 states, running on 7 continents, completing the 6 world majors, the 6 marathon majors, what led to that? What made you, was that an accident or did you strategically say, nope, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit every marathon I can. How does this happen?
It evolved. It evolved. In January of 96, in between the Chicago Marathon and that I qualified and running Boston, a friend of mine and I ran the Disney Marathon. And as we're sitting in our hotel room the night before the race, he said, have you heard about this group of people who's run a marathon in each of the 50 states? And I looked at him and I said, you're nuts. And he said, well, no, look at it this way. You've run Chicago, so Illinois is out of the way. You've we're running Disney tomorrow, so Florida's out of the way. We're running Boston in April, so that's out of the way. We've already got Alaska planned for June, so that's another state. And we've got Marine Corps scheduled for the fall. That's 5 states. We're 10% of the way there. And in typical runner's logic, and typically this happens around mile 23 or 24. The math gets a little bit fuzzy, but I
Okay.
thought, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We're 10% of the way done. And it evolved from there. But one of the things that I work with folks is an attitude of what's next. When we
Mm,
accomplish a goal, it often seems like that goal isn't significant enough. So we immediately set the bar higher. And I work with people in lives outside of running, as well
mhm,
as coaching marathon and endurance runners. I coach professionals of all types, typically when they're feeling stuck at a point in their lives. And it could be in their career, it could be in a relationship, it could be just their status in life overall. And many times there's a hesitancy to take the wins, to really recognize how good they are and what it is that they've accomplished. And I was susceptible to that for a long period of my life, that qualifying for Boston wasn't enough. So the next idea of maybe running 50 states. And once that was accomplished, running the seven continents. And once that was accomplished, running the six world majors. Always looking for that next thing because what I had accomplished wasn't enough. And I think a lot of people kind of understand that, if I accomplish it, it's not that big of a deal. And so I treat myself differently than I treat you or my clients because, what would you tell somebody who came to you with a problem in your life and say, don't be as hard on them, on
Mhm.
yourself as you are with them. And so that's part of the evolution that I gained from running and from other aspects of my life kind of melding together.
Wow, that's actually amazing, and I can see that you bring that into the way that you coach. I do want to dive into that in a second, but first, I want you to share this story because this one, I don't know, it stuck with me after our conversation yesterday. Out of all the places that you've run, you've you've covered the world basically. What stands out as maybe the most meaningful or the most challenging? I'm interested to see if you're going to say what I think you're going to say. Based, your answer might have changed, but yeah, what was the most meaningful or challenging? What stuck with you? I'm sure there's many, but give us one.
There are many, and the most significant running adventure, and one of the most significant adventures in my life, is a marathon that I didn't finish. And it's one that was very meaningful to me, and it was in Antarctica. And I had traveled to Antarctica as part of my journey on the seven continents. And by the time I first went down to Antarctica in 2007, I had run over 60 marathons. I was well on my way across the journey of all 50 states. I had run several of the world majors, and I had run many of the continents, not all seven yet, but I was pretty far along the way. And I was also scheduled to run another marathon the next week as part of this trip to Antarctica in South America. And around mile 18 of this marathon in Antarctica, I started to feel really tired, exhausted. I told myself, I'm just going to sit down here on a rock and rest for a moment. Well, a short time later, I looked and on my jacket were about 2 inches of snow. I'd been sitting on that rock unaware of how long I had been there, and the snow and blizzard showed me that I'd been there for a while. It turns out that I developed hypothermia. I was found by one of the course marshals who asked me if I wanted to leave the course. And I was resistant because leaving the course meant failure. And in my mind, failure meant that I was a terrible coach, I was a terrible runner, I was a terrible person. These are just kind of the mentality that I and I think many other people are susceptible to. That failure not only means that we didn't accomplish the goal for that day, but it spirals into what we think of ourselves as a person. But I did get off the course. I got on the back of his ATV. He took me to the Russian infirmary because in Antarctica there aren't a lot of spectators. The spectators that were there were seals and penguins and groups like that. And
The best
this is
ones.
true.
The
They
best
are there.
ones.
They are there. But we run
How
among
cool.
5 science stations of different countries. And the place we started and finished was the Russian science station in Bellingshausen. So I was taken there where the Russian doctors wanted to try to warm me up and didn't want me to go back to the boat to leave Antarctica because of my hypothermia. I was diagnosed with hypothermia. And I recognized a few things that even though I felt really ashamed and embarrassed for myself when I got back to the boat, because all of the other people on the boat were celebrating their victory of accomplishing the marathon, and I felt despondent. But I learned a lesson the next day. The sun came up, my friends and family still loved me, and I was able to go on and explore the rest of Antarctica. I was also blessed that 6 years later, I went back to Antarctica and I finished the race. It was my seventh continent. But most importantly, on that second trip to Antarctica, there were people on the boat who did not finish the race. One fellow who was a friend of mine that I had met on other travels broke his leg during the race, and another woman got physically ill and could not finish the race. And there were a few others too. And I was able to share my story from the first time I was there and give them senses of hope and that this isn't the end of the world. And even if you did not have the opportunity to come back later on, you gave it the best shot that you could that day. And all we can ask for on any given day is the best performance that day. And um, life will go on.
That's awesome. That is, I do think that life places you sometimes in the exact right moment when you're supposed to be there, and you gave that group of people what they needed to hear at that moment from your experience. That's amazing. And by the way, I had
Absolutely.
no idea that running was such a dangerous sport. Truly, I did not know that marathon running was this incredibly dangerous.
Well, it can be, and that's
Ooh.
another benefit that I feel very fortunate to have is to share my experience, strength, and hope from all of the running that I've done with the runners that I coach. I try to encourage people to ask me questions, just like people who are watching tonight. If you have questions, please be willing to share them because my experience with what I've run and with the number of people I've coached, there's probably no experience that you're going to have or think you're going to have that I haven't experienced directly or indirectly. And part of the benefit, I think, is to be able to share that with different perspectives. And each one of the runners, each one of the professionals that I work with in my professional development coaching is an individual. So I try to work with where they're coming from at the time, what is causing them to feel stuck in marathon training or their point in life, and how to get unstuck. And I, try to do that in a way that's non-judgmental, but also helps them to better understand where they're at and how to get to where they want to be.
Ah, how did you stumble upon this? How did you go from running the marathons and focusing on that and all these great goals you had there to then coaching? What happened to make you make that shift?
In 1995, when I was training, I started hanging around and sopping up like a sponge information from my running coach. He he was a physician as well and a marathon runner who typically ran marathons in about 2 hours, 40 minutes, 2 hours, 30 minutes. So he was a
Ooh,
very, very good runner as well as a physician. And the more I hung around him, I would glean information from him and I would watch how he interacted with the other runners in our group. And by the end of the season, before the Chicago Marathon that year, he asked me to help him coach because he thought that he saw something in me that, as he later expressed it to me, there was some empathy and compassion that I had with runners that he thought was beneficial to help him help other runners along the way. And I developed coaching that year and went on to coach the next year with him, and that just led to 30 years, 30 plus years of coaching now. That also developed into expanding because we found out that many of the people who were running were using running as a diversion, were using running as a coping technique. And some of the things that I would share with them to get a better performance or better understanding of where they are in running was helping them in another phase of their life. And we would apply some of the things from the running world to their work world or their relationship world. And I went on to get certified not only as a running coach, but as a professional coach, as a holistic stress management coach, as a mindfulness and law. So I work with lawyers and other professionals in both holistic stress management and mindfulness teaching. And all of these things kind of blend together in ways that I didn't think would ever happen when I started doing this in 1995.
that's amazing to see what that's grown into. And you've, like you said, you've been doing this for a very 30 years, right? 3 decades, over 10,000 people. I mean, what are some of those standout moments that made you feel I'm in the right place? I'm doing the right thing. This was my purpose.
Mhm. One of the favorite stories I have is a woman who was with me in a group that I coach for 5K running. And this woman was a suburban housewife. She, at the time, was in probably her mid 40s. And she hadn't been a runner, but she wanted to do something like running, just try it. And when she first showed up to the first day of training, she was dressed like a suburban tennis player with the white skirt, the white top, the visor, and tennis court shoes. And she couldn't run a block. And this was an 8-week program to try to run a 5K. And she was dedicated. She asked questions about what she could do to improve. So we started by having her walk, and then walk run, and then she continued with walk run until the day of the race. And at the end of the 5K, which is 3.1 miles, we were up in Lincoln Park, and it was a loop course. And we did 3 loops of the course before getting to the finish line. And so, in this, by the way, was a women's only race. So she felt more comfortable participating in this. It was her first race ever, and it was a women's only race. And she got to the 3 mile mark. And remember, the race is 3.1 miles. So at the 3 mile mark, she stops running. And I don't know what's happening. I'm on the side of the course, and I run. Excuse me. I just had this vision of her at the 3 mile mark. And I asked her, "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" And she started to cry. And she said, "I've shown up for my kids. I've taken them to all events. I've cheered them, but I've never done something like this for myself. And I don't want this to end." And I said, "Well, don't think of this as an ending of the race, but think of it as a new beginning for what you can accomplish down the road." And we did finish the race. She finished it. And she continued running with the group for about another 6 months or so. And then she went off to do other things. And I've lost track of her over the years. But that was a very meaningful memory for me, because when she grew up, she also grew up in an age when women were not allowed to participate in athletics. It was before Title IX. She was a young child, a young woman in high school and college before Title IX. And that meant that sports weren't an option for women. Um, I mentioned that the first women marathon in the Olympics was 1984. The first time a woman ran the Boston Marathon was 1967, and she was almost pulled off the course. There's famous stories about being pulled off the course and what she had to go through in order to finish the race. So things were different. So thinking about what this woman went through to accomplish 3.1 miles sticks with me. And the fact that she didn't want to finish because she didn't want to lose that moment, and how memorable that is. And so for each of the folks that I try to work with, I want them to find something like that. I want them to find something within themselves as to why this goal is important. Why, if they're feeling stuck, it's important to get unstuck. What is it that they can do to accomplish the goal?
That's incredible. And it's not even, I love the stories that you shared because age is not a barrier.
No.
You had a beautiful story about it. I mean, you were lapped by someone who was 80 years old. I mean, my goodness, that woman would have lapped me about 10 times over. But you also have a beautiful story about a phone call you got from from a very special woman as well that shows age is nothing. Age is just a number.
Yes. This was a woman who called me now. It's probably been 12 years ago now, 10, well, at least 12 years ago now. And I got a call from her, and she said, "You were recommended to me by my doctor. I'd like to run a marathon. I'd like to run the Chicago Marathon this year. My birthday is 2 days before the Chicago Marathon, and it's a very special birthday. I turned 70 years old." And she was not a runner. She too grew up in an era before Title IX. So it wasn't athletic. She too went to all of her children's sporting events, taking them to practice, being there for their events. One of her children was an Ironman. One of her daughters, one of her sons and one of her daughters were Ironman participants. And she decided that she'd like to run a marathon when she was 70 years old. As we talked, she also said, I should tell you that in full disclosure, 3 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Are you still willing to take me on as a client and help me through the marathon? So I made sure that she had clearance from her doctors and she started training. She and her husband joined her in training because I think he wanted to be protective of her. He he was ex-military and was protective of his wife and wanted to make sure that she was going to get through this safely. So he joined and he also ran the marathon that year. And not only did this 70-year-old woman with Parkinson's complete the marathon, she went on to join us for training and completing marathons in the next 8 years. And part of this was that her doctors believe that the running every year kept her Parkinson's at bay, and that she was able to have a more fulfilling life with by her exercise program and running the marathons. So that age is not a barrier. Other things that block us in our lives, and we think we block us in our lives, in whatever we're doing in our endeavors, don't have to be barriers. In fact, we had a fellow last year as part of Team ALS United who completed the marathon being pushed by his two sons because he was diagnosed with ALS a few years ago. Earlier last year, I worked with him to complete the Boston Marathon as well, being pushed in his wheelchair by his sons. You can see the picture here. He's the guy here at the white hat. If any of you were on the team last year and were at the pasta party dinner the night before the Chicago Marathon, you heard Jeff's story. And he had been pushed by his sons in Boston. And Jeff was a former Boston qualifier and had run several Boston marathons and many other marathons around the country. I think he had been up to maybe 40 or 45 marathons around the country. And so I hope I'm not shortchanging him, but he had considerable marathon background as well before getting diagnosed with ALS. And his sons helped him accomplish the goal of completing both the Boston and Chicago marathons by being pushed in his wheelchair. So significant ways to achieve goals that we may not have. And also for all of you who are listening, that's part of the mission of ALS United, is being a part of something bigger than ourselves. There's a term in the psychology world of altruistic egoism, that we get more meaning when we're doing something for the benefit of somebody else. That's part of the meaning that we have. That's part of the meaning I try to have people find out about themselves. What is it that we can bring to an external source, a power of some sort greater than ourselves? It doesn't have to be religious or powerful or spiritual or anything. It just has to be something that we are willing to work towards that is not self-centered, that helps us gain knowledge and benefit from being of use to somebody else. And this was an example of what Jeff's sons were willing to do to get him across the finish line, not once but twice last year in marathons, pushing him in a wheelchair so that he could enjoy the experience of a marathon. And for each of us who work with Team ALS United, this is part of the mission that we support. When you're part of the Walk at Cantigny, you're part of the families and support there. It's not running the marathon, but it's support in a different way, and you're part of that community. The fundraising that you do, whether it's for the walk or for the marathon or other causes along the way, has meaning that you experience. This is part of the team that you were joining along the way. And I found it rewarding to help others accomplish their goals.
And I get goosebumps when you talk about that stuff because I've never run a marathon in my life, but I've been on the sidelines cheering them on at the Chicago Marathon. And to get to see those runners with that Team ALS
It's
jersey
amazing.
run by, it is just, I can't even explain it. And then give people a little glimpse into what it's like to train Team ALS and hear those stories and the why behind what they're doing. What's it like to be a part of this, to be a part of their journey here?
When I'm on the lakefront path in the summertime and I see a Team ALS member run by with the sunflower on the front or the Team ALS on the front of the jersey, there's a connection there. And when you train on the lakefront path and you see people with with a Team ALS jersey, there is this instant connection. You may not know that person, but you know that person, and there's a connection that we have that it doesn't need to be stated. It's felt. And knowing that when we get to race weekend to visit Sarah at the expo and the booth at the expo, to be part of the pasta party dinner, to hear some of the stories of the families and members that are at the pasta party that have worked 18, 20, 24 weeks of training to get to that moment before the Chicago Marathon, to be in the room, people that you've never met before, but you know, maybe people that you've seen on the training path or have been part of in some of the calls that we conduct, how meaningful that is. And knowing that you're a part of that.
So amazing. And we've got such a massive team this year. They get to work with you, they get to have conversations with you. You're there to inspire them. I mean, what are some of the biggest, maybe mental hurdles that these runners need to overcome?
I think the biggest hurdle is fears and beliefs, and also setting expectations. You know, many of us set expectations of what we want to do on marathon day, and those things change in the course of training. And this is true whether we are whether we're an experienced marathoner who's run 10 or 20 or 40
Mhm.
marathons, or somebody who maybe at this point on April 21st hasn't run a step yet, or hasn't run a step in years, or has never
Mhm.
run a step and is preparing to run the Chicago Marathon. But I found that when I set expectations, only two things can happen. The first is that I meet my expectations and I immediately set the bar higher. The second thing that happens is that I don't meet my expectations and I kind of go in a downward spiral. So when either one of those happen, because eventually if I keep setting the bar higher, I'm going to set it so high that I can't physically or mentally achieve that goal. So I have to kind of take a step back and understand that each and every day I want to be driven by what's inside of me to get the best
Mhm.
performance I can get out of myself today. And it's realized that the experience that I have today will help me when I get to the starting line and the finish line in October on the streets of Chicago. And you know, every goal we set comes at a price, and we need to be willing and able to pay that price. But it also means that part of our expectations need to be reset periodically. And just because I had a day where I didn't meet my expectations doesn't mean that I won't help myself tomorrow and improve tomorrow. When I think about the improvement, it is step by step. Um, you know, you've heard the saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So, and that's true in marathon training, and it's true in other aspects of our lives. We have to take the first step. We have to realize where we are right now, as well as where we go. I talk in training a lot about the GPS moment. We know where our destination is, crossing the finish line in Grant Park in
Mhm.
October. But where are we starting? When we set our GPS in our car, when we set our GPS on our phones, putting our destination isn't going to do much good if we don't have a starting point. And even if we're going from point A to point B, we often take detours. And so we hear the phone saying rerouting, recalculating, and it means that we just have to readjust. It doesn't mean we stop going towards our destination. It means we just recalibrate. And when we recalibrate, sometimes it increases the intensity of our work or our training. Sometimes it's regressing a little bit in order to get further. I try to remind people to think of being part of the I team: impossible, improbable, inevitable success. And for many people, when we're sitting here at the beginning of the training season, finishing a marathon or running a marathon faster than I ever have before, running a Boston qualifier, or just going through the training process may seem impossible. But by the time we get around the 4th of July to the end of July, that needle shifts from impossible to merely improbable. And then if you stick with it and recalibrate as necessary, we
Mhm.
move the needle again from improbable to finish to inevitable success to finish. We learn so much about ourselves along the way that we improve. So the impossible becomes improbable, becomes inevitable success. And that's part of what we want to encourage everybody to do. And again, recognizing that you're not alone
Yeah.
because you have support of family. Many of us who join Team ALS are running in memory of or in honor of a family member or a friend or a friend of a friend. If that person can't run, if that person can't train, if that person can't walk in Catigny, you can. You can help them along the way, and you can make that benefit from impossible to improbable to inevitable success as part of your goal. And it doesn't have to stop when you cross the finish line in Chicago. There are ways to work with Team ALS United in other ways from now until race day, from race day and beyond. You can keep doing fundraising, but there are other events and other ways to get involved to support the family members that are supporting you along your journey.
Beautiful. And supporting the runners and supporting, yeah, coming out and just giving your presence, cheering people on. You said you bring up such a great point. There are so many ways to participate. And I love these stories that you shared with us because it shows you don't have to be a lifetime athlete. You don't have to be a runner. You can still run a marathon. You've seen
Mhm.
that over and over. So, what would you say to those people that are maybe are going to stumble upon this, are going to watch this and hear, oh my gosh, Coach Brennan, he has done all of this. That's not me. I can't do this. What would you say to those people that might have this on their bucket list, but just feel like they can never do it?
I've sat in your chair. I've been in that position before I trained for my first marathon, um, thinking that this could be impossible. And by grit and determination, and by having friends supporting me, coaching me along the way, running with me along the way, I made tremendous friends over the years that I've been running marathons. And bit by bit, the confidence grows. And more importantly, the self within me grows when I realize that incremental steps help reach a different goal. And I have sat in the seat of doubt, self doubt, of thinking of being a failure when I didn't complete a
Mhm,
marathon in Antarctica,
mhm.
of feeling despondent and feeling a failure when I was passed by an 80-year-old woman and a woman who was 7.5 months pregnant. And yet something drew me back the next year and the next year, and then 8 years off and coming back again in learning, really learning in 1995 how to train for and run a marathon. And that really sparked the joy of running that I had. But it also led to this incredible journey of being able to share my experience with others. I'm part of Team ALS United and others along the way.
Beautiful. And on that, that kind of brings me back to something pretty big here because you've experienced, as you told us, as you shared already, both really incredible highs, but also some really you've hit some really big setbacks. Now, on a deeper level, when it comes to especially you mentioned mindset, spirituality, we haven't really touched on it yet, but running was such a big part of your life. It was a huge part of your life, I'd be willing to say. What happened when, unfortunately, you and I were talking yesterday and you're not able to run marathons anymore, right? Life took you down a different path. So what was it like when something that was such a big part of your identity for so many years, your whole world now was built around this, now it was taken away from you?
Yeah. The story is that I was training for the Chicago Marathon in 2022. And in September, mid to late September of that year, I was out on a 4 mile run and felt very fatigued and had to walk at the end of that. And then the next day, I went out for a 3 mile run and was very fatigued. So this wasn't a conditioning issue. Something felt off. And I went to see my doctor, and through a series of tests, I was diagnosed with coronary artery disease. And within a year from that time, I had surgery for two stents to be implanted in my heart, and also have a pacemaker. And the type of heart condition that I have doesn't allow me to run. And so I'm working to get back to running and walking for exercise, but I've been told that running marathons is probably no longer in the cards. So I had to do a lot of searching, soul searching, to find out what really brings me meaning. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to coach. So what I impart to others is vicariously running marathons. So each of you who are out there on Team ALS United is helping me run another marathon this year. So thank you for that. But part of this journey is also showing a different mindset that we can continue to grow even if there are setbacks along the way. That a diagnosis like a heart condition doesn't have to be the end of my identity. But many of us identify something with what our job is, what our status in our family is. You know, it goes to things like, where do I live? What's my house like? How much money do I have? These are things that so many of us think about as our identity, just like I thought of myself as a runner, as a
Mhm.
marathon runner that has to change. And, you know, sometimes the change is due because of choices we make. I'm a professional as a lawyer, but I decide to retire from the practice of law and do something else. That could be of my own volition. Having coronary artery disease is not of my own choosing. So, you know, sometimes the choices are made for us. Sometimes the choices become easy because the alternative is something much more significant that
Mhm.
won't allow us to continue. So, making the shift to identify what we can continue to do to find meaning in another purpose, to share what we've had, what we've learned about ourselves, helps ease that burden.
And I know that your practices, your mindfulness practice, your spirituality, your faith, all of that had played a part in that. What are some of those core practices that you rely on daily?
Um, I have learned things like meditation and mindfulness practice. I meditate regularly. Sometimes it's for 45 minutes to an hour a day. Sometimes it's for 3 minutes a day. It depends on what the circumstances are a day. But other healthy coping techniques include ecotherapy. I'm a believer in ecotherapy, which is getting out into nature, walking along the lakefront path in Chicago, walking through a park, even if you don't live in a city like Chicago, where we have a beautiful lakefront, is there a park nearby? Are there trees someplace nearby? But even if you aren't able to get out into nature, sit in your window where there's sunshine coming in during the day. There's a huge benefit to being near sunshine, but more benefit from being outdoors. And when we're going outdoors, just take a few moments and be sensual. I encourage people to use all five senses when we're out in nature or when we're experiencing life. Periodically, just stop and look around and ask yourself, what do I smell? What do I taste? What do I hear? What do I see? What can I touch and feel along the way? And that leads us to the sixth sense, which is our mind. What are we thinking about in this? What can we discover in taking in all of these things around us? But also, how does this benefit me? When I focus on the things that I can sense around me, it becomes easy to forget a lot about the troubles, the reason that I'm stuck at my point in life. Even if it's only temporarily, even if it's only for a couple of minutes, even if it's for a couple of seconds, that's a few seconds or a few minutes or a few hours or a change in lifestyle that I didn't have before. The other thing that I try to encourage people to do is to identify the stress and how I view the stress. Because we can view, you know, I work with many people who think, I want to have a stress free life and I want all stress to just go away. But the only time that's going to happen is when we're dead. Because even if
Mhm.
we're sitting here, we have stress in our bodies by breathing. Our chest moves, our nostrils move, our bodies moving in and out as we exhale. So there's a stress reaction in our body for that. But many of us can see stress as debilitating and very negative. But stress can also be a challenge. We can take stress in a way that brings out the best in us. So part of the exercise is to identify how to transform stress into something that brings out the best of us
Mm.
rather than being debilitating and a threat to us. Um, there was a study done a few years ago where the psychologist examined over 30,000 people, and they asked them two questions. They asked them first, how much stress have you had in your life over the last year? And the second question that they asked is, do you believe that stress is harmful or not harmful to you? And then about 10 years later, they went back and they looked at the same group of 30,000 people to look for premature death. And the way that psychologists do their testing, they were able to carve out some things, but they looked at it. And, with those two questions, there are four possible uh, factors that you can look at. High stress, high stress in their lives, but they feel that stress is harmful. High stress, but they feel stress is not harmful. Low stress, feeling stress is harmful, or low stress and feeling stress is not harmful. And it not be surprising that the highest cause of premature death of those were those who said, I have a high stress level and I believe stress is harmful. But surprisingly, the lowest amount of premature deaths was of those people who had high stress but believed stress was not harmful to them. They were able to use the stress in their lives as a benefit to make them healthier and have more productive lives than people who had low stress and believed that stress was either harmful or not harmful, which was a fascinating study to me that shows the importance of us having stress along the way,
Mhm.
provided we challenge it. So what I like to do is see, even if I'm in a stressful position and I think of it as a negative stressful position,
Mhm.
how can I turn this around? How can
Mhm.
I look at this differently to make this more of a challenge to bring out the best performance in me rather than feeling it's debilitating? And it got to the point that, one of the things that I did after my diagnosis was to fulfill a long time dream, and it's write a book. And the book brings about some ideas of how to identify stress, how to identify core values, and how to cope in ways that I may not have thought of before, and bring that to fruition. And it includes things like thinking about how I can use stress in my life in a positive, meaningful way to get the best out of myself on a daily basis.
That is a beautiful. I was gonna head there anyway, so you just teed that all up for me. That is absolutely beautiful. I'm glad we have that cover. You wrote a book called Seeking Serenity: Finding Happiness by Embracing Your Positive Attitude. I love that. I did not know that that was a lifelong dream for you. Can you give us a little bit of just a snippet of what was that whole process like?
Mhm. I found that, well, first, I identify the word serenity as being the absence of fear, because I find that myself and many people are driven by fear. That when I dig a little bit deeper, I find that I'm either afraid of losing something that I have, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get something that I deserve, or that I want, or that I demand. And when either one of those things happen, I can get into a very negative spot because it's fear driven. But if I'm serene, if I'm calm, if I meet the challenge of the stress, I have no fear. And again, this may be 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or it could be a longer period of time where I'm coping with it in a more healthy way. But the idea behind measurements of the book brings things from my past. It brings in things from my legal career as a practicing attorney for over 40 years, for running the marathons, for coaching, for being in recovery from alcoholism since 1989. All of these things bring different pieces to who I am, but also ways that I can connect with other people, regardless of what they're facing. The chances are that one of those four elements will connect with somebody that I'm working with. And when I work with them, when I'm working with runners in particular, or with professionals, it's trying to identify that connection point, where it is, and as a starting point, and move on from there. Because that's how it worked for me when I found a connection, and it changes from day to day because my daily circumstances change. But if I can sort of identify the reason for being stuck today, it helps me get unstuck by looking at one of those four elements from my past and how they converge.
Beautiful. And if you guys want to check the book out, the link is right there in the comment section. You can head over, you can buy it on Amazon.
Bless
Oh,
you.
goodness, thank you. I was so excited about the book. It got me all sneezy. So you guys can head over to Amazon, check out that link if you guys want to know more about Coach's journey, more about all of these wonderful things he's been sharing about us. And I love, love what we were talking about here. Turning that stress into a driving force that motivates you and inspires you. And I am promising you, I am bringing that into my daily life because this week has been crazy and you have no idea how much I needed to hear some of those words from you today. It is, as soon as we get off this, I'm going to be applying that. The timing on this was incredible. So you guys check that comment section. Make sure you find the link. It is right there on Amazon. And I don't know if you've been seeing some of these comments, but it looks like we have a runner from Team ALS who has been joining us on the show tonight. She is giving you some love and talking about how wonderful your stories have been. And she loves hearing all about it. And look, it looks like she is taking on the marathon. So this is
Great.
amazing. Good luck. Good luck at that race. You're going to be absolutely incredible. Now, I want to hit you with one more thing. I want to keep you forever, basically. You're going to have to come back because there's just so many. There's about 1,000 questions that came up as you were talking that I wanted to dive into, but we just ran out of time. So you're going to have to come back because I would love to dig deeper into some more of this mindfulness and spirituality practice and give some advice to our listeners. So to be continued the next time. But I do
Great.
want to find out, after everything you've been through, we've heard some of these so incredible stories. You have had some really great highs, like we talked about. Something was taken away from you. You had to reinvent yourself, find new ways to bring your passion to life, all of that. So after everything you've experienced, running, coaching, reinvention, what does crossing the finish line mean to you today?
I've crossed 100 marathon finish lines, and each one of them has been different. And as I get to mile 26 with 2/10 of a mile left, there is a wealth of emotions. It's laughter, it's crying, it's joy, it's sadness. Like that woman, I didn't want the race to finish because I want to hold on to this moment. And the amazing thing is that I found that I can laugh and cry and feel emotional all at the same time. And I can't identify which one is going to come up as I near the finish line or how it's going to affect me. But there is a moment. And I think back in the context of both every race that I've run and every challenge that I've had in life, there comes a point where I know I'm going to finish. I know I'm going to finish. And so I want to hang on to that moment. And if I'm in the middle of a marathon and it hasn't happened yet, I remind myself this will happen. You will get to that moment. It may be as you're making that last step across the finish line, but it will happen. So hang on until that moment happens. And once it does happen, even if it's at mile 3, um, then I want to hang on to that. That in the toughest times of the race or whatever I'm facing in life, whether it's a heart diagnosis or a relationship or a work situation or a social situation, um, it will get better. It will get better, and I can get through this.
Love it. I love it. Coach Brandon, you're seriously the man, the myth, the legend. I don't have any other words other than that. What you have accomplished has been incredible, but even bigger than that, what you've helped other people accomplish. Your story is it's just one little blip in just all of the lives that you have touched, or literally around the world. You have coached people around the world and helped them do the impossible. And you've given them life-changing experiences. And I cannot thank you enough for not only what you're doing for everyone that you meet, but what you're doing for Team ALS and what you're doing for us at ALS United Illinois. It has been incredible. We are so lucky to have you. Thank you for sharing your story. Is there anything that you want to say to everybody that is watching or might stumble upon this? before we go?
Well, you
That's a
mentioned,
big thing. That's big.
yeah, very simple. You get 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You mentioned impossible, but remember the transition is part of the I team.
True.
Impossible to improbable to inevitable success. But I think for last words is try to remain curious because when we're curious, we remain teachable. When we're teachable, we can continue to learn. We can learn about ourselves and we can learn about others around us. And that brings a lot of good into the world. So stay curious.
Love it. Beautiful. Stay curious. Coach, you are amazing. Thank you for everything. And I know that we are going to see you back on the show very soon.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful one and enjoy that yellow shirt. I love it. I love it so much. Oh, oh, you guys, I really didn't want to let him go. I would just keep him here forever. I hope that you guys were as inspired. I hope that you walked away from this now with this new mindset and, in his own words, stay curious and realize that impossible is not a thing. Strike that word out. It's just part of the eyes that you guys can do anything you want to accomplish. I want to give a massive shout out to every single runner on Team ALS, every single person that is there spreading the word, that is donating to the team, that is showing up to cheer them on. All of you are making such a huge impact in the world of those fighting ALS. So a massive thank you to all of them. Again, in Coach Brennan's words, please remember to stay curious and to keep going out there and achieving your goals because, as we've heard, the body has no limits. I mean, sometimes it does, but you can accomplish some incredible things if you just have the right mindset and if you push through and you have the why behind what you're doing. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to come back and join us next month. I will see you all then. And until then, everybody, have a beautiful rest of your month and be bright and shine your light. We'll see you next month.